supporting you in your dog parenting journey. The Dynamic Dog Owner with Debbie Potter.
Hello and welcome to the Dynamic Dog Owner, the podcast designed to support you, the dog parent, in your dog parenting journey. This podcast is designed to help you feel more confident, empowered, and heard, I suppose, as a dog owner. It's not about how to train dogs, the how-tos. It's more about the concepts, the ideas, and how we can be the best dog owner possible through our own learning journey. If, obviously, you're looking at your dog training advice, head over to our academy. There's a link in the description. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about harnesses. Now, obviously, there's a big debate about harnesses. Let's get this out of the way first. Personally, my dogs all wear harnesses. They always have. They always will. My first dog didn't. He had a collar and a lead to begin with. And then they had a harness from, when he was about, I have to remember. We'd had him a couple of years before we kind of got into harnesses. And it's, I suppose, this is where things evolve, things change, right? What was acceptable or was the norm 10, 20, 30 years ago, it changes. And that's why it's okay. Like now, I'm quite happy to say, yes, once upon a time, my dog was attached to a collar. Quite simply, I didn't know any different. I didn't know there was an alternative. I didn't know the science. I didn't know whys, etc. And this is before I became a dog trainer, so it wasn't just that. And there's theories that harnesses make dogs pull. So if you put your dog in a harness, they're going to pull more. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but I think it's worth mentioning why I talk about harnessing. And quite simply, it's a load of rubbish, because nothing's going to make your dog pull more. Well, things will make your dog pull more or less, but if your dog wants to pull, your dog is going to pull, quite simply. If you don't teach them that not pulling is a great thing to do, then that's their default. And there's loads of reasons for pulling on the lead. We know all about that. It's emotions, it's trained, it's actions, it's consequence, motions, blah, 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 blah. But generally speaking, many people believe that if you put your dog in a harness, they're going to pull more. And that is simply because a well-fitted harness doesn't hurt. So anything that makes your dog stop pulling, so a specific type of harness, a specific lead, a specific collar, a specific this, that, attachment, whatever, loads of devices, etc. out there. If it works and works pretty damn quick, more than likely it's because it has some form of pain, discomfort. So that's kind of like one thing about harnesses. And that's a completely different topic. I'm sure we've done a podcast on it before. But today we're going to talk about harnesses in a slightly different note. Harnesses are brilliant, in my opinion. Harnesses are for safety, for comfort, for sort of guidance and supporting your dog. You can take hold of them nice and easy. And your dog takes safe, most importantly. Your dog stays safe. Many a time I've had to take hold of a dog's harness. Once I was with a friend and their dog fell into some water and couldn't get out the side because the gap from the water, well, they didn't fall in, they jumped in, but hey, they couldn't get out again. But the gap from the water level to the surface was too high, they couldn't get out. I could grab hold of the harness and pull them out. You can't let the collar, it's just something over the top of their head. You can use it to guide them if you're crossing over some, some rocky terrain or what have you. So you can help your dog in a harness quite a lot. Now, the way I'm going to liken this to, this is kind of like the theme of today's podcast, is does your dog think of their harness like the woman thinks of her bra? Go with me. If you're a male listening, think shirt and tie. So we always talk about, burn the bra. Women, feeling constrained by a bra. Most women will say, that feeling you get home and you can whip your bra off and you put your pajamas on and you haven't got to wear it anymore, is quite freeing and it's quite comfortable, etc. Does our dog feel like that about their harness? Again, liken this to men. I presume, I'm not a man, I don't know. I have worn a tie. When I was at secondary school, we had to wear ties. I was most up in arms about it because I did not agree with it, because obviously I am female and they were like, oh, well, it prepares you for the workplace. What female generally wears tie to work? It's not the norm. Yes, you might have to if you're in a particular role, but I've never had to wear a tie since leaving school. And I was very much like, this is not fair. We are women. We don't have to wear ties. It should be optional, the ties are there or not there. Anyway, so I have worn a tie before. I bought them when I was in like year 8. So I wore a tie for 4 years, going to school every day. And obviously it became a fashion statement. And if you're like an 80s kind of person, remember this is I didn't go to school in the 80s, I think 90s. The tie got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. It was a fashion statement in the end. It was ridiculous. Anyway, so if you're a male, think of this like you've been out at work all day. You must have a relief from taking your tie off. Now, that's kind of like a stereotypical film image, isn't it? You watch a film and the man comes in and loosens his tie and kind of like undoes the top button. I've never had that in my life because that's why I assume that's what happens in films. That's what most men do. No men in my life have ever worn ties. My dad never wore one. Well, he didn't work in an office when I was little, so I don't remember him ever doing that. And my husband doesn't wear a tie to work. So I assume it's like in the movie, you should come home after day in the office with a tie and you just want to take it off. I don't really remember much about it at school, but definitely that top button was always undone under the tie. And if we could get away with getting our tie, we would. So anyway, tie, bra, whichever way you want to look at it, the relief when you get in of being able to take it off and not feel quite as restricted. That's kind of the vibe of this podcast episode. Because there's nothing quite like that feeling, is there? After a long day, taking it off. So it kind of got me thinking, this like, I don't know how it's coming to my head, but it got me thinking about how our dogs probably feel the same if they wear their harness for a long period of time. Now, obviously, we take them for a walk, they wear their harness for safety, for comfort, etc., to reduce pulling or make pulling comfortable, etc. So we have to use them, we have to wear them. I'm definitely a fan of them, and my dogs definitely have the most comfortable harness I have found for them, which is important. But do they ever just go, well, we take it off? So obviously in terms of thinking about, obviously they don't have the choice. They have to wear something when they go out. They can't be naked outside. They're just my thoughts on this. So obviously we know that by law, dogs have to wear a collar and an ID tag. Now, obviously the law about this is really old. I think it's 1995, I want to say. And obviously before then, harnesses weren't, again, as I said, things changed. Harnesses weren't really a thing back then. So now it's kind of like collar / harness and tag. Your dog has to have one on the second they step outside your house. And that's like literally in your front garden. And if they don't, you can get fined because they need to be labelled because they're a nice good property, load of rubbish. But there you go. They have to have that tag on. So we need to have a harness / collar for our dog. So that's kind of like by the by. But when you get home and you take it off, there's not actually a requirement for your dog to have a collar or harness on inside. They don't have to because it's your property and they are contained. In your front garden, in your back garden, they do what they're supposed to because it's classed as public the second you step outside the front door. So they don't have to wear them in the house. So there's nothing wrong inside with your dog being completely naked. Just like we would take our shirt tie and our bra off, they are very welcome to take everything off. They don't have to have it on in the house. Many people do. Many people like to have a collar on a dog so that they can grab hold of them quickly, so that if they escape the garden, they've got their tag on them. I completely get that. It's really, really logical. And some people do actually keep their dog in a harness in the house as well. You don't need to. If you want to, I'm sure you've got a valid reason for doing so, but you don't have to. And I'm sure, my dogs don't have anything in the house. They are naked. It wasn't always this way. So Leo, my first dog, who only had a collar, he got a harness. I think he must have been about 7 or 8. And the reason he got a collar harness was because I used to notice when we went places, he'd start choking a little bit or something. And that was because the collar was irritating him. And I didn't realise at the time that's why it was. And I think I must have seen something. I was like, oh my God, I'm not doing that. And I'll do it in a harness. But my current dog, Dave, had a collar to begin with. So he had a collar probably his first year, for about his first 9 months of his life. And he wore it in the house. But one day, I came downstairs after being asleep all night, and there was a cabinet on the floor. Like a whole cabinet had fallen over. It wasn't a massive cabinet, but like, think 2 drawers. So a good size. It was on the floor. My husband said, I heard a thud in the night. Obviously didn't wake up. Why would you? I sit like a log, didn't hear anything. And I found the dog's collar underneath the cabinet. So clearly what happened was that Dave had walked past it, caught his collar on it somehow. As he wanted to move away, the cabinet fell over, but obviously he got his head out at the right time. It was obviously loose enough. Great. From that moment on, he never wore a collar in the house again, because they can be really dangerous. We see collars as like a safety thing, but actually they can be really dangerous. They can get caught and stuff. Dave proved it. If you crate training, if your dog's in a crate, take the collar off, because they can easily get it caught inside and the worst things can happen. Multi-dog households, obviously you guys know I've got 3 dogs. They are always eating each other. They're always like playing or getting someone's head in their mouth or what have you. I say always, they're not, but they do every day. There's a little bit of rough and tumble. If they get each other caught in their collars, and I don't see, or I happen to be out. Now, I'm 99% sure they sleep the entire time I'm out, but who knows? If I'm not there supervising them and one of them got caught in each other's collar, again, you can have a tricky situation, because we all know what happens if things tighten around your neck. So that's why I made the choice in the house that we are completely naked. I'm sure for their comfort, it must be like taking your bra or your tie off when you get in. It's got to be. They can't necessarily, and this is my opinion, obviously, I don't think they can get comfy fully if they've got collars on, they've got harnesses on. It must feel like it's digging in somewhere. So there's a few things I want you to look at here. They don't have to have it on in the house if they don't want to. They do when you step outside, but in the house they don't. Obviously, yes, dogs are microchipped. We know that the microchipping law doesn't supersede the collar and tag law, so you still have to have your dog collar and tag IDs. But if they escaped and they've got a microchip, we can still be reunited, just then it's a little bit more challenging than if someone could just read the number. But I think, obviously, when we're looking at harnesses, if you are going to have your dog in a harness, say, for example, you go to work and you have them in a harness all the day, or you are going to have them on a collar, let's think about comfort. Because they want to be comfortable. I'll just say, some people do keep their dogs in a collar and a harness, because some people will attach them, especially when they're puppies, they'll attach to the house line, and we know we don't like that attached to a collar necessarily, so put it on the harness. So young puppies, dogs who still need a lot of intervention, or might well be on a harness all day in the house. There's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to make sure that we are thinking about the bigger picture. So comfort is really important. If you're going to be wearing your harness and your collar for a long period of time, is it comfortable? Is it well fitted? Is it soft? Is it not digging in anywhere? Because there are so many different ones. We've talked about this before. There are so many different harnesses and leads and collars and equipment out there. Make sure it is one that's well fitted, not too tight, not too loose, doesn't dig in anywhere, is a nice material. If they've got long fur, it doesn't catch or snag on it, because it's actually comfortable. So make sure it's really comfy. One other thing I would consider is, if you are having the same harness for outside and inside, which some people might, is when they obviously go for a walk, training your dog, they are going to go through undergrowth maybe, they're going to go running through grass. We need to make sure that if it gets wet, if it gets dirty, we take it off, we dry it, we change it for a fresh one. We check it for anything like brambles or thorns inside it, sticky bits, because just like us, if we've been out for a walk, generally, we've got on outer clothing, you then come in. If it's wet, if it's dirty, we take it off for our own comfort. If your dog's harness is wet or uncomfortable or got sticky bits in it, we need to take that off to make sure that it is clean, fresh, nothing untoward, no bits being stuck in our dog all day. So this is if you are keeping it on all day, let's do that. And obviously, you might want to check them for injuries, etc., ticks and all that kind of stuff. If we're leaving a harness on for a long period of time, we could have those things stuck within the harness. So just think, if you are keeping collar on, if you are keeping harness on throughout the day, can we make sure they're as comfy as possible? So obviously, if this is going to be you, and like I say, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not passing judgment. My dog's a native house. That's absolutely fine. Yours don't have to be. But if you are going to keep them in equipment all day long, we just want to make sure they're comfy. So here's like my top tips of what we need to consider. So if you're going to be wearing something all day, like a collar or a harness, or for a long period of time, think about the material. So is the material soft, not irritating, not rough? Some of like the webbing can have a rough edge. Some generally Biosafe leathers are quite soft, so they're a good option. Make sure they are well fitted, not too tight, not too loose, just right. So it doesn't get caught on things like Dave does, but also so that it's not too tight that it's irritating. Think again, shirt collar, too tight, not nice. Tags. Again, this is another topic. We talk obviously about tags. You have to have a tag on your dog when they're out and about, but there are so many different tags around now. Traditionally, it was always a big dangly tag, dingle, dingle, dangle. Personally, I think that must be like having tinnitus. If all the time you can hear ding, 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 ding of it jangling, that must feel like having tinnitus and something ringing in your ear the whole time. Obviously, your dog might not be bothered by it. Some dogs who shadow chase, one of my mum's dogs a few years ago, Charlie, he used to have a dangly tag, and he had part collie in him, and occasionally, if he was in the right mood, he would chase shadows, and his tag would reflect the sunlight as it jingled and make shadows on the wall, and he'd be like, oh, where are they? And he'd get a little bit unsettled by it. So she made a little pouch for it to put in. I went, hang on a second, why don't you try one of these? Because you can get tags that are flat and sit flush to the collar, so you haven't got the dangle dangle, you haven't got the jingly jangly noises, because it would annoy me, is all I'm saying. Having a jingle jangle in my ear all day would really annoy me. So that personally is something I find really important, to have not a dingle dangly tag and a flat tag. You can also nowadays get harnesses you can get harnesses and collars that actually have your ID details printed on them. So you can get like labels that you can sew onto a harness, and you can get collars that have it imprinted or printed on them. So you've got that option. So you don't have to have a dingly dangly tag. Because it's, on a walk maybe for half an hour, not a problem. But if you're wearing a collar all day, every day, I liken it to tinnitus. It must feel like that. Now, harnesses, obviously, and again, this is more, the collars obviously are a little bit less intrusive. Harnesses are more intrusive. If your harness has got sticking out bits, big buckles, or anything that just, if they were laid in the right angle, would dig in, just consider if that's comfortable. This is where, if you are going to consider having your dog harnessed for periods of time inside, you can always consider having two. A walking harness, and then a thinner, softer harness for in the house if you wanted to keep them in a harness. I'd say it's fine. If you decide to keep them in a harness all day, that's absolutely fine. Just think, let's make it as comfy as possible so they don't get the bra feeling. And again, obviously, as I mentioned before, let's check it to make sure that it's not dirty or got anything stuck in it. Now, obviously, if you want your dog to be naked, so this is like how we make them comfortable if we're going to wear that stuff all the time. If you want your dog to be naked, how can we make sure that that is as safe as possible? Because as we said before, if your dog is naked and they escape out the house, they don't have a tag for them. So if you're going to have your dog naked in the house, what can we do to make sure that they can't accidentally get out or what have you? Consider stair gates, internal doors that open like onto your hallway. So for example, I've got a double door, like a porchway. So I've got two doors. So I can shut one before I open the other one. So there's always like an airlock, so to speak. But you could, if you haven't got that, you could have Stairgate. You can have a Stairgate across your door. There's now a really cool brand. They're called Dog Gate. And it is a gate that attaches from the wall to your door. So there's automatically a gate there when you open your front door. They're so cool. They've got it in a holiday house I go to. They're really, really cool. Obviously prevent your dog from escaping, but you can have stair gates on the exits and entrances. You want to make sure your garden fences are safe and tall enough your dog can't jump out. Garden gate locks properly. You also want to supervise your dog when they're in the garden so that they can't just jump. And you might want to make it a habit to check where your dog is before opening doors. So obviously, most people would probably say, if their doorbell rings, their dog goes a little excited or has some form of reaction. I therefore know where my dogs are when there's someone at the door and I want to open the door, because they're all like, oh my God, there's someone at the door. So I don't have to check where they are. But say your dog doesn't, before you check the door, before you open the door, you might want to go, right, where is my dog? Rather than accidentally being by your feet, you open the door and out and running. So things like this, just being a little bit proactive, will mean that you can absolutely be safe naked in the house, or not you, your dog. That's up to you. You can have your dog naked in the house safely and still take precautions so they don't escape. That mean, because that's kind of the biggest worry when it comes to having a dog naked in the house. They don't have any ID on them. And you can make it things, say, check where they all are. And then obviously training comes a huge part. There's loads of different ways you can train to ensure your dog's safety and not leave the house. Barrier, sort of what's it called, boundary, that's sort of the word, barrier, boundary training is where they don't cross the line. Now, I've got to admit, one of my dogs don't all do this, but one of my dogs does it automatically. I can leave the front doors open and he will just stand inside and wait until I ask him to leave the house. I don't remember working on it too much with him as a puppy, but clearly I did. And it's something he's really, really good at. One of my other dogs will follow me everywhere. So he has no boundary. He's like, oh, you go out the front, I go out the front. And if I ask him to sit and wait at the door, he will. And the third one, nothing. And so he doesn't. But your dog might, and you can teach them a boundary threshold training of you don't cross this line unless you're invited. So that can be a really, really nice way. Obviously, as with anything, it's not foolproof because they are animals. They have their own minds and no emotions. And one day it might be easy to do that. The next it might be hard. So we still need to train things like an emergency stop. So say your dog out the house, you can teach them to stop. You can teach them recall so they come back to you. So if your dog would accidentally, despite having all the precautions, get out of the house, you've got ways of getting them back. And obviously, this is something we can. Even if this is something we talk about quite a lot actually in training. Some people say, well, I never plan to let my dog off lead, so I don't teach a recall. I would still teach a recall, even if you never plan on letting your dog off lead, because one day you might need it. And it might be because they've got out of the house, and therefore we want to be able to get them back in really quick. So those are kind of things we can help with. So if we'll help consider. So this is kind of like a part of service now. You don't have to keep a collar on a dog all the time. You don't have to keep a harness on them all the time. You can if you want to. But just think, are they sitting at home going, when's this bloody thing coming off, feeling like the burn the bra mode? And if we are going to keep it in them, if we are going to keep them in it, then these are the precautions we can make and make sure that we're keeping it safe, keeping it comfortable, checking it, etc. And if we aren't going to, we're going to go naked, then there's things we can do to counteract any potential risk of being naked and not having tags on you. So hopefully this is useful. I always say that at the end of the podcast. I assume it's useful. I just chat away, give you my thoughts. Hopefully somebody finds it useful. But yeah, it's just a different thought. And just think, if you're a woman, do they have that burn the bra feeling over their harness? If you're a man, do they have that let's get this top button and tie off really quick feeling when they come in? And let's try and help them not have that feeling and know how we can make them as comfortable as possible. And hopefully you've enjoyed the episode. As always, like, comment, share. If you think a friend might be interested in the podcast, then share your favourite episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, so do comment. And if you've got anything you'd like us to cover in the podcast we've not covered before, then just drop me a message. Have a great week, and I'll catch up with you next week. If you love listening to the podcast, why not check out the Potter Academy for practical dog training advice and how-to videos. The hub is broken down into sections, and hundreds of pre-recorded videos are there for you to start watching whenever you choose. You can watch them back as many times as you like. You also get to talk to other community members and discuss your training and benefit from live Q&As with myself where you can get your questions answered. Why not make use of our 3-day free trial where you can access all of the content on the hub absolutely free for 3 days. The link is in the description below, so do check that out. And I can't wait to see you in the hub.
Thank you for listening to The Dynamic Dog Owner with me, Debbie Potter. See you next time.